Today we're going to bring you a double header with Nicolle Wallace and her show Deadline White House, and Ari Melber and his show The Beat. Nicolle Wallace is going to bring us a very good panel, and they're going to be discussing the tariffs, the retraction in our economic growth, and some other issues. We're going to leave it open for what Ari Melber is going to discuss, but we're pretty sure it's going to be very good, educational, and fun to watch. So we're going to go ahead on and get started. Let's start with Nicolle Wallace and her good panel.
Hi there, everybody. It's 4 o'clock in New York. I'm so happy to be back. Bear with me in my scratchy voice. And ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for Donald Trump's trade war. Today, Donald Trump found himself drowning in the fallout from his own demand that the American people make do with less so that he can raise tariffs, those tariffs that are damaging our economy and our standing in the world. A wave of brand new reporting suggests that there's more Trump-inflicted pain to look forward to. We played Donald Trump's comments for you here yesterday, but it bears repeating because the candidate who promised day in and day out on the campaign trail that he would lower prices on day one is now telling all of us out loud, too bad, you're going to have to pay more. Watch.
Somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know? And maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more than they would normally.
The shelves will be open, empty. Oh, well. Here's the cover of the normally Trump-friendly New York Post. It says it all. Take a look at this. Skimp on the Barbie. Trump admits tariffs will raise some prices, cause shortages. Barbie shortages. This is what we're getting with Trump 2.0. Trump's comments on Wednesday capped what has been weeks, actually months, of Donald Trump's millionaire and billionaire stacked cabinet downplaying, if not outright dismissing, the real anxiety this creates and the pain caused by the Trump administration policies.
Access to cheap goods is not the asset, is not of the American dream.
Americans who want to retire right now, the Americans who have put away for years in their savings accounts, I think they don't look at the day-to-day fluctuations.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up, and she'll get it next month.
Yeah.
The armies of millions of people. Well, remember, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones. That kind of thing is going to come to America.
No, it isn't. There are no screw-making assembly lines coming to America. And people who look at their balances and their savings and their retirement, that's everybody. That's all of us, all the time. And skipping a Social Security check, if your 94-year-old mother is your mother, I'm guessing it doesn't hurt. What are they talking about? And now, the war on Christmas. Trump telling the country's children there will be fewer toys to look forward to this year. New York Times reports this, quote, this Grinchy pronouncement by the president had the value of being truthful. Many American toy makers and retailers have started to pause their orders as the effects of Trump's tariffs ripple out, threatening to snarl supply chains. It could all have a big impact on this year's holiday season, since it takes months to manufacture, package, and ship many products to the U.S. But the impacts are expected to be felt sooner than that. NBC News is reporting this, quote, President Donald Trump's massive China tariffs are jeopardizing American fireworks shows, threatening to drive up prices and limit supplies. U.S. fireworks wholesalers and distributors say they've been canceling shipments from China for this year's 4th of July holiday. Some are also halting manufacturing in China of fireworks for next year's celebrations of the 250th anniversary of America's independence. Donald Trump asking Americans to put up or shut up with the consequences of his economic policies is where we start today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. CNBC senior economics reporter Steve Leisman is back. Also joining us, publisher of The Bulwark, host of the Focus Group podcast, Sarah Longwell's here. And with me at the table, U.S. financial commentator for the Financial Times, writer of the Unhedged newsletter, Robert Armstrong is back with us. Steve Leese, when I start with you, there was a moment in our conversations when the only data point we had was the market going up or down. We now have the thing that I feel like you and I have been gnawing at since this all began, and that is the real world consequences. People having to make very difficult choices about what their families can afford around the holidays, things that you can see and feel. And it's almost comedic, but ruining the 4th of July.
Yeah, well, these things are probably going to happen. There is some inventory in the country right now. It's pretty interesting what happened. The reason that GDP report was negative was because there was this influx of imports, which are subtracted from the total growth numbers. So there is some inventory around. When it actually hits, there's an expectation. If you look at the maps of the ships not being in the ports right now, you can be pretty sure that it's going to happen. And then you're going to get, I believe, some increase in prices because either the tariffs will be piled on or there'll be a scarcity of certain goods. I don't think that this is escapable at this point because of the supply chain time it takes to order something, have it made in China and bring it to the United States. It's not as if over some period of years, Nicolle, we could probably work this out. But the idea of slapping these 145% tariffs on and really quite sizable tariffs on other countries outside of China means that the global supply chain that companies have been working for a couple decades now has been pretty massively disrupted to the point where you may not even know what your tariff's going to be. There's something called bonded warehouses, Nicolle, that I would offer you as a piece of interesting economic insight here. And that's a place where products go before they have to be paid tariffs on. They're it's like a storage area that's a kind of it's not in the country yet. And these bonded warehouses are full. And if the tariffs remain, that stuff may be sent back, because if you're a retailer and you ordered something for 100, well, now it's going to cost 245 or something along those lines. And so you may not be able to pay for it. You may send it back. So we are in a deep purgatory here, a deep uncertainty. And tomorrow we'll get the jobs report, and we might get the first inkling of how this is affecting jobs in America.
I have some reporting from a neighborhood toy store of exactly what you're describing from the owner of a toy store in a real neighborhood serving real people that live there. I want to ask you, though, a question about whether we're at a point now where we might have a recent historical parallel. I mean, when the COVID pandemic hit, there were supply chain crises, right? I mean, everyone remembers the run on toilet paper and whatnot, but that was a global pandemic, and there were things to point to, and in the end, people did blame Donald Trump's handling, but there was something tangible to explain it. Is there any story that the White House could manufacture to explain these goods sitting in warehouses and not coming here because the prices are either unknown or too high, which sounds like what you're articulating, other than what Trump has done with his inexplicable, arbitrary, and chaotic tariff bonanza?
Well, he tried yesterday to blame the stock market on Biden, and I think there was a lot of laughter around Wall Street, I think, on that one. I think that people pretty squarely put this on the shoulders of President Trump. You're right, though. Economists are calling this what is known as a supply shock. You can go back to perhaps the 70s with the oil price shocks. That was a supply shock, and the pandemic as well. You know, what's interesting about this, and I'm sorry, but a little bit worrisome in this score here, is that most recessions end up being ones of demand. People can't afford things because they lose their job. This supply shock is not easily handled through the normal tools that we handle downturns in, which is that you end up trying to get people to buy more. But if the problem is that there's not enough stuff and people are losing their jobs because of that, goosing demand is not going to help. And there's a second element to this that is more worrisome to me, which is that the normal circuit breaker on this tends to be government spending. And What's happening with government spending? That's coming down at the same time you have the supply shock. So we could be in for a twofer here over time.
Let me read you that reporting about toy store on the west. Let me read it to you from the New York Times. At West Side Kids in New York City, the shop's owner, Jennifer Bergman, 58, is concerned that she may not have any toys to sell at Christmas. Toy companies are already marking up prices 10 to 20%. And Ms. Bergman, she said she would try to buy as much as she could now, but that the shortages were already starting. She had placed a large order of scooters to arrive by the summer, but the importer rerouted the shipment to Canada because it did not want to pay the tariff. She was told that she would only get a portion of her order. If the tariffs remain, Christmas will be like, quote, something we've never experienced before, Ms. Bergman said. People will be standing in line to buy things that cost twice or 3 times as much as before, she said. Her business was already under pressure from competition by Amazon, but she fears that tariffs will deliver a final blow. I don't think I will be in business for Christmas, said Ms. Bergman, who added that she was consulting a bankruptcy lawyer.
That is tough.
Donald Trump's America.
And look, this is the arrival of the economic reality of tariffs. You put a tariff on anything, whether it's a doll or it's an iPhone or it's a car, one of 3 things is going to happen. The price is going to go up and production is going to stay how it was. We are going to produce more in the United States. This is Trump's version of the story where these factories will appear and we will be buying American, the iPhone screwing in. Or a third, we're just going to have less. We're not going to buy that thing. There's going to be less consumption. And the fact is, it looks more like in the short term, it's got to be inflation or having less. And the magical appearance of American production, it's not on. And that was always going to be true. But what you saw the other day with the president talking about Barbie dolls is there, at some point, you have to admit the reality that there's an inflationary aspect and there's a deprivation aspect here. And there's just no way to avoid it.
You know, he's saying, I mean, I don't know anything about how he's raised his kids, but his parallel is to say, instead of buying 30 dolls, you buy 2. Again, that's not how most kids in America are raised, where you go from 30 to 2 dolls.
No.
How do you lay those numbers onto the average American family?
Well, I tell you, you saw a piece of news this very morning that was real and it was vivid. It wasn't dolls, it was results from McDonald's. McDonald's reported their quarterly earnings this morning and they said less people are coming in. And the CEO of McDonald's was absolutely clear. Consumers are uncertain and they're being more careful about what they buy. Now, there's a lot of people, including a lot of people who work in the White House, for whom going to McDonald's is a cheap meal. But for a lot of Americans, that's a treat. It's a meal you can afford that you go with your family, or it's a little treat you give yourself when you go to breakfast.
Yeah.
But what Americans are thinking is maybe I'll eat that toast at home and I won't get that Egg McMuffin. And, you know, that's telling you that even before the empty ships start to roll into American ports, Americans see what's coming and they're being more careful about their budget. And that's how economic trouble starts.
Sarah Longwell, the politics for any human being would be catastrophic. The politics for someone who ran for president, saying that the price of everything will, quote, go down on day one, I'm talking about the grocery, standing in front of melting meat, should be lights out. Where's the political sort of pendulum swinging on Trump?
Well, I mean, look, you're already seeing the impact of his numbers going down, and not just in his overall approval rating, but his approval on his handling of the economy, which has always been his greatest strength. But one of the things I want to point out, I really have 2 points from listening to voters. One is they definitely think that this is Trump's economy. His thing yesterday by trying to say, oh, this is Joe Biden's stock market. No way. Voters associate him with the tariffs. Many of his voters are sitting there saying, I don't know, my guy's saying this is going to work, so I'm going to wait and see and hope that it works. But a lot of those same Trump voters, right, and this is the second point that I want to make, many people in the Trump coalition are working class and more low-income voters. There has been this political realignment that Donald Trump has really supercharged, where the Republican Party is now much more the party of working class voters. Those are the people who are going to be hit by the higher prices. These aren't people who had $30 to begin with. These are people for whom that $1 was very special, and now that doll is going to be out of reach in terms of price. And so it is his voters, in many ways, who are going to be the most negatively impacted. People at the upper end of the income scale, they can say, okay, well, maybe I scale back on a vacation or something. But for people who are saying, I already can only do so much for my kids at Christmas, and now because of Donald Trump's tariffs, I can't afford much of anything. I mean, I hear voters talk like this in focus groups all the time where they said, look, the reason I voted for Donald Trump is because I wanted him to lower prices. And already now they are complaining about the fact that he doesn't seem to be focused on the economy, that he's not doing anything to bring down prices. And they feel that because, $10 here and there makes a big difference in their lives. And so those are the people that are going to be hurt. And I think that's where you're going to start to see some of Trump's floor potentially fall out.
I mean, small business owners are an incredibly important, not just part of the economy, but part of the political landscape. Both sides fight over them ferociously. And I mean, this anecdote has to be playing out all over the country. Sarah, what are you hearing from that part of his support that wanted to emulate something that he was selling as he played a successful business person?
Well, part of what's been interesting to me to listen to people who really support the tariffs, who are trying to give him and say, no, like we should do this, is they have a bunch of different reasons why they are with him on the tariffs. They either say, well, look, we have to do something about the debt, so we're going to pay the debt down, or we need to reshore American jobs. We need to bring back manufacturing, or it's a negotiating tactic. And you hear all these different things, which of course mirrors the chaotic messaging coming from this administration, right? We don't really know why they're doing it. And as a result, it can't be all of those things. You will not accomplish all of those things. I think most people are skeptical you can do any of those things with tariffs. And so I think that for a lot of these voters, especially for the business community that really counted on Trump coming in, cutting regulations, cutting taxes, who thought he would be good for them and were, unfortunately, I think, willing to put aside the sort of threat to democracy that he posed in favor of what they thought were going to be positive business moves from Donald Trump. I think they are going to find themselves the most damaged by this and maybe the most regretful of their choices.
I am endlessly interested in that category of humans and leaders and small business owners and voters, people who thought they could put aside the democracy mumbo jumbo because Trump would make them richer. Trump is going to make everyone poorer.
Well, I think what Wall Street is hoping, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past, Wall Street is hoping that Trump is ultimately going to back down on the tariffs. And we've had a pretty sharp rally on Wall Street in the last couple of weeks. We've bounced almost to the level we were at before Liberation Day. And I think that's people looking at this pattern where the going gets tough, either in markets or in the economy, or the popularity ratings fall, and Trump gives concessions or folds. And I think that's what's driving what optimism there is on Wall Street. I have an acronym for this, which is TACO. Trump always chickens out. And I think the taco trade is what is driving Wall Street up recently. Steve may see it differently, but that's my reading.
You get the last word, Steve.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that, and it is true he's backed off almost every time. We've also had some decent earnings in the tech world that I think has helped things. I did want to underscore the point you were making about small business and sort of the hypocrisy of the administration on this. When the market was coming down, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, was justifying what they were doing, saying this administration is not about Wall Street, it's about Main Street. Well, who is more Main Street than that toy retailer that you were talking about earlier? Businesses between 1 and 49 employees employ 58 million Americans. And they do not have the access that the bigger companies have to ask for exemptions or to somehow absorb these costs. This bankruptcy by this small retailer, I think this could be a bigger issue going on, and there are people who will lose their job before it very quickly. I think that big business may end up trying to hold on to workers to see if they can get through the process here of the president reversing himself. Small retailers, real Main Street, they don't have that possibility.
If only someone had warned the country that this might happen. Steve Leisman, thank you very much. Robert Armstrong, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Sarah, please stay with us. We're going to hoard you for the hour if we can.
Good job from Nicolle Wallace and her excellent panel, giving very good explanations of these tariffs, the retraction in our economic growth in this country. Also giving us the truth on the dismal outlook approaching us, especially for our holiday season. So we need to be preparing. We all know what's coming. Nobody's being fooled by Donald Trump and his lies about this being Biden's economy. We know it's your economy, Trump. You inherited a very good economy from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So stop with the lies. Most likely it's going to be the low end, those of us on the low end, going to be hit the hardest by these tariffs, especially the MAGA faithful. But you know, they're going to give him a pass. But we shouldn't. We're not going to give him a pass. We're going to hold him accountable, he and the Republicans who are allowing all of this to happen. So we're going to see what's going to happen in the future. Hopefully we can have a jolly holiday season like we did under the Biden administration. I doubt it, but there's a possibility. So we're going to move on and see what Ari Melber has to say in his show, The Beat. And I'll give a little bit of a thought after we watch what his segment is all about.
Right now, Ari, I stumbled there because I want to congratulate you on your Emmy nomination.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, congratulations to you. I'm happy that this is such a mutual thing. It's a lot going on, but as you mentioned, the News Emmys nominations came out today and recognized some people, including some other colleagues of ours, and so it's a nice thing.
It's for you going toe-to-toe with people making big decisions. I'm proud of you. Proud to be your colleague.
Respect. Proud to be yours.
Have a good show.
Thank you. Our thanks to Nicolle Wallace. A nice impromptu moment there. We will mention by the very end of the hour a little more about that. But let's get into the news. We are covering what is the first major ousting of a Trump White House official in the young second term that we're here living through. It's the security official who uncorked a breach by adding outsiders to a government group message discussion on the app Signal. It's a big deal. You probably remember hearing about it. Well, he's been relieved of that security post. Michael Waltz out as National Security Advisor. That is, of course, a key role typically held for, well, longer than 100 days, typically for years, by seasoned national security vets. This move is Trump's first major senior staffer change of the second term, coming just 48 days after Waltz first released internal discussion of war plans through that app. Many experts said it was a fireable offense at the time. It drew magazine covers, kind of reflecting and really mocking what was seen as an amateurish mistake, playing with larger risk. National security experts said that mistake literally made the United States more vulnerable to massive foreign cyber attacks. Today's move shows how the lingering scandal and the heat ultimately proved too much, at least for the official to be in this post in the Trump administration.
In editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg says he was accidentally texted war plans.
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic.
So the person that I thought was on there was never on there. It was this
Who
guy.
was that? What person?
Well, I'm not. Look, okay. Laura, I take responsibility.
Trump said it'll never happen again, and from now on, they'll only talk about war plans over Snapchat.
The White House and the president's national security team doubling down on efforts to shift blame surrounding that Signal chat debacle.
Mike Waltz, I guess he said he claimed responsibility. I don't think he should apologize. I think he's doing his best.
Maybe he was doing his best. The verdict is that it wasn't good enough. And so those early defenses, nothing to apologize for at all, have melted into a version of what passes for accountability, even if it comes with spin and is partial. Waltz is taking another job for the Trump administration in New York, representing America at the UN. No permanent replacement has been named today yet for Waltz, so Secretary of State Rubio will be the temporary backfill. It is the kind of shakeup Trump has sought to avoid, the Times reports, And while the UN can play, of course, important roles, Trump and Republicans have routinely belittled it as something like a world hall monitor. So being sent up to New York to meet with those foreign diplomats outside of the circles of power in Washington is, in a MAGA sense, viewed as a demotion. There are signs Waltz himself heard about this very last minute. He was on the White House grounds, we could see there this morning after doing a TV interview. And after some tough headlines about this change started trickling out, the White House then announced he would take this UN vacancy. There he was today. The signal breach cost Waltz his job, so it is notable that he was just caught using signal in an open press gathering of the cabinet again this week. This is a Reuters news photographer who captured his hands, you see there. Now, experienced people know when you go to the open section of the cabinet meeting, the mic is on, it's on the record, as they say, and the cameras and the photographers are quite visibly there. Yet this Reuters photographer was still able to capture him opening his Signal app and including what he lists as apparently real names of high-ranking officials. They're not using code names here. There's references on his phone to what looks like Rubio, Gabbard, and J.D. Vance. You see there. The phone exposed a message from the sender named J.D. Vance, which said he had, quote, confirmation from a counterpart, and, quote, it's turned off. That's what we could read on it. Those are fragments of the communications. They could mean a lot more to certain foreign adversaries who can combine them with other intel. So that was his last cabinet meeting as National Security Advisor. And to be clear, like the security breaches that dogged his now short tenure, it might be remembered more for that kind of sloppy approach to security than the boilerplate statements he made during it, praising the president.
This is leadership at its finest, led by our commander-in-chief who loves the troops and they love him.
We've had 100 days of your leadership with respect, with strength. It's an honor to serve you in this administration, and I think the world is far better, far safer for it.
Whether the world is safer remains to be seen, but the Trump administration's impact on safety and creating safety risks out of whole cloth is what got Waltz ousted so quickly. I mean, again, if you think about these jobs are probably hard to do, but if you just did nothing, you might have had less of an impact than how much he leaked about war plans. Now, another short-lived Trump aide you might remember on your screen there, Anthony Scaramucci. Well, he got in a little jab, roasting his fellow MAGA traveler when this news hit today, noting Waltz has now served about 9.2 Scaramucci's as a unit of time for people who don't hold down these jobs very long. Now, that's the tumult inside the White House. And it is just one job, albeit an important one, that reinforces how facts matter. It was the fact of sharing the war plans, covered, documented, sort of can't really spin or deny your way out of that, and then the story lasting, people staying on it, that ultimately changed the staffing. Now, that's just one position, an important one. But it reminds you that while the administration and some of the folks around them say they use their own reality or nothing matters or the press doesn't matter anymore, this was entirely a product of the facts, the reporting, and the sustained pressure. Around the nation, Trump continues to be really facing a souring economy and a trade war that is hurting him. And for all the talk about Republicans who move with lockstep loyalty, that, you know, Ted Cruz will stand by Donald Trump once he won and never push back, and Trump has benefited from that type of support at times, it's also notable right now that Donald Trump has picked a giant fight that's still going on with a right-leaning group that isn't rolling over. I'm talking about financial conservatives and Wall Street and people involved in all that work because they're alarmed over the costly tariffs that are driving the economy down, shrinking gross domestic product, which is a warning sign for a possible recession. Fox News' sister outlet, the New York Post, skewering Trump today for hiking toy prices with his tariffs and then trying to minimize it all. Skimp on the Barbie is how the front page is mocking the president. And it is still the economy stupid, as James Carville memorably put it. And the point there is not just that the economy can drive election outcomes, it's that the economy just sets the baseline mood. In boom times, people may look the other way. But when things go bust, like they have under these tariffs, the nation takes a more skeptical look at its government. And people are now hearing facts about Trump's stumbling 100 days, which is clearly driving opposition, as I mentioned, in conservative media like The Post, in financial quarters, and then really across the country here. These are really stunningly negative underwater results for Donald Trump. You look at this on your screen, we are a long ways from his November comeback, underwater in all major polls, down 11% in Fox News. So that's the temperature. Then there's the political thermostat, because we are in a dynamic process. There are those who think you should just give up or tune out. As a free country, you could do that. But there are others, like the signs we see at some of these protests today, this one in Michigan, you voted for democracy, not dictatorship, that are trying to summon the moment to build something larger. In California, we saw a sign that simply says, "We, the people, deserve better." Thousands were seen gathering in Boston, in Washington, in San Francisco, and Chicago. These are new rallies, so if you're watching live on television or on YouTube, you're seeing things that are happening now. Today's news, but it might look familiar because over the last several weeks, we've covered a bunch of similar scenes. Smaller groups in small towns, some of them in conservative and red states, larger gatherings in the large cities, of course. It's a pro rata, per capita type thing, but this keeps happening. More of a groundswell than we've seen in most administration's early periods. The shrinking economy also drawing comparisons to a very memorable Seinfeld episode featuring George Costanza. So Jimmy Fallon brought this up on Late Night, discussing Trump's trade war leaning to economic shrinkage, to that shrinking GDP I mentioned, and likening it to George's troubles.
It shrank. Trump was like, well, it was the 3 coldest months. Of course, there was shrinkage.
Yes, the U.S. economy is undergoing what economists refer to as a George Costanza.
You can see the shrinkage got everybody thinking. But the joke only works, especially in mass late-night shows, if everybody is in on the punchline. A lot of folks watch late night, including people rooting for Trump, including Republicans or conservatives and what have you. But the facts still matter. And if you dare to tell people that the economy is not shrinking, that the trade war is working, you are going to run right into the brick wall, which Trump has run into in this polling I showed you, because people are living it. You cannot fool people out of their economic lived reality. And like I mentioned, some folks are following the news less these days for all kinds of reasons. You don't have to follow the news to have heard about the failed tariffs and your retirement accounts going up in smoke and all of it being the choice of this president. So how does that reality and these other governing problems collide? We have 2 special guests when we're back in 90.
I didn't think this administration could still shock me. But today's story, which I read about in The Atlantic, was beyond belief. It was like, holy crap, on steroids.
Holy crap on steroids. That's how National Security veteran Senator Warner explained his reaction to Rachel Maddow when we first had that signal breach. I'm joined now by MSNBC contributor Professor Jason Johnson and Sabrina Singh, a veteran of the Biden campaign who served as Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary. Jason, one takeaway is the facts documented and consistently repeated did have an impact here.
They did, and it's something that I think a lot of people are surprised. There are so many different mistakes we've seen, strange people we've seen move into this administration, Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard. I think there was a belief by a lot of people in and outside of Washington, when was someone finally going to face consequences, right? When was someone finally going to get in trouble for the mistakes that we've seen in this administration? So Waltz is out, but again, he's kind of being given a promotion, depending on how you look at it in MAGA world. I mean, taking somebody who couldn't respect the importance of signal chats and then sending them to the UN actually potentially exposes us to more security breaches. So it's a sign that the Trump administration is not completely immune to public sentiment, but not necessarily a sign that they've learned their lesson on how to be responsible with national security secrets.
Right. I think the fact that they haven't learned their lesson because they have not cordoned this person off, even as he was busted by the Reuters photographer using Signal again in a public setting. Forget the other protocols. We're all around the cameras, and as journalists, we love getting new information. So within reason, I mean, we also have our standards and practices. We don't just take any phone photo we see and throw it up there. But We love getting information, but this would seem to be incompetence, not a choice to share it. Having said that, Jason, I'll let you continue and then bring Sabrina in, who has a lot of background here. Politically, they view it as a demotion because they're not into the UN. Right. NSA, they view as, as a bigger thing.
And that's the thing, you know, it is a reflection of the failure of this administration to recognize that the United States, and mind you, they're doing everything in their power to make sure we don't remain a global power, but the United States is still a global power. And therefore, moving from a domestic position to the United Nations should be seen as a promotion. The idea of taking somebody who's incompetent and now putting them in a place where their incompetence can be on display for the entire world, including our enemies, is not good decision making, certainly from a president who always claimed that he hires the best people.
Now, Sabrina, you know why you're one of the perfect guests for this, right?
I think I have an idea.
Yeah, I mean, you are at the intersection. You deal with national security reporters. There is, of course, some public obligation for us to know about what the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies are doing. But as your work, you know, straddles that, you have things that are classified or secure. And so you dealt at that intersection. I'm curious what grade you would give Waltz, not only for the original breach, but taking into account that he didn't seem to improve from it, to learn from it, if you will. What grade do you give his conduct, and where do we go from here?
Well, look, I'm certainly not a professor here, but I think there was already room for improvement, and Mike Walls already showed that he failed at that. I mean, starting that signal thread, adding the reporter, of course, that is a problem one. But I think even though Mike Walls has now been fired and moved out of his position, or maybe promoted in some way into the UN, the person that really committed the crime here was Pete Hegseth. I mean, you have to remember that it was Hegseth who put classified information about a military operation that hadn't started into that chat. So even though they're rearranging, the pawns on the deck here, Mike Walls still hasn't been held accountable. Pete Hegseth still hasn't been accountable. And at the end of the day, the moving and the chaos that Donald Trump has injected into the system, the national security system, a system that relies on steady leadership, that really sends a message to our adversaries and to our partners and allies around the world that there is chaos in this administration. Yeah.
Jason, I mentioned the wider mood out there. We can always aim for the stars and say in a perfect civic democracy, everyone would be informed and following the facts and reasoning out Jeffersonian debates all the time. But that's not reality. People are more distracted than ever, the media ecosystem we know. And yet the economy is something you cannot avoid. I don't know about you. I have some friends who say, oh, yeah, you do the news. Like, I try to avoid all news. And I'm like, I get it. I could see how that could be a nice week as a short-term solution. You can't avoid the economy if you're working and living in the United States. Here's Fallon joking about the polling.
Trump claimed that egg prices are down, gasoline is down, and groceries are down. Then a staffer said, sir, those charts are your approval rating. He said, oh, okay.
They're syncing together. That's the joke. But they're also syncing together. That's the reality because of how people live. No, Jason?
Yes. And here's the thing. The Trump administration is going to try and spin this, right? They're going to say, yes, Fallon was joking. Oh, there's a little bit of shrinkage in the economy. Not that there's anything wrong with that, right? They think they can spin their way out of it. But here's the thing about the economy. You can't. Because it's the thing that even people who avoid news, as you mentioned, have to deal with. It's not just egg prices. It's housing. It's the lack of housing that we're having and the slowdown in housing production because you have so many people who are migrant workers who aren't working anymore. It's what you're hearing now about organizations and companies saying, we're not going to order products for Christmas. The slowdown has already started to happen. This administration just fails to be in touch with the reality of Americans. And when this hits in the summer, when people are not taking vacations, when summer camps are scaled back, when people are saying, you know what, we're going to order pizza at home instead of going out to dinner, it's going to be impossible for Trump to spend this, and it's going to be impossible for members of Congress to hide from it in 2026.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Sabrina, while we have your expertise, I wanted to put up the headline that you have to go back a long ways to find a time where we had a Secretary of State sort of doing double duty. It has happened. Kissinger did it as NSA. I think we have that. Yeah, it notes Rubio will hold both positions, something no officer has done simultaneously since Kissinger, which he did under Nixon and Ford. And he was let's just say he was expansive type of diplomat. But that was more of his power grab as well. If you look at history here, it seems more like just, hey, we had a spot open. Do you have any thoughts on that structure, whether Rubio wants it or is up to it? Is that a good idea on the policy side?
Well, I mean, he's not just doing double duty. He's not just acting as the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State. He's also the administrator for USAID that they've now completely disbanded. So he has a lot of responsibility on his plate. That is not those three jobs are usually represented by three different individuals. I think what matters is how long is this going to be an interim position for Marco Rubio? It's not sustainable for someone to have that position for an extended period of time. It's just the world events just don't allow for that. And to have the National Security Advisor, that person is with the president pretty much at all times and traveling with the president. The Secretary of State has that ability to be abroad and away from the administration and engaging on parts of the administration's behalf because they're not tied to the president all the time. So I don't know how this balance is going to work. I think it's how long really Marco Rubio can occupy that interim position for. I would hope it's not for that long because at the end of the day, the Secretary of State position is so important and needs the full attention of that individual at all times.
Yeah. Sabrina and Jason, on all the above, thank you.
Okay, there you have it. Another good segment by Ari Melber and his two special guests, very good guests, explaining it to us very well, getting their point across, making us understand it easily. Yeah, Trump with his national security advisor finally getting fired over Signalgate. Donald Trump waited a while until it was out of the news. He didn't want it to be very big news, but he also gave the guy another job, some ambassador job. So it was a soft landing for the national security guy who was fired. It should have been Pete Hegseth, the Pentagon chief. He's the one that's over all of this. The ex-Fox News host and the untreated alcoholic. But Donald Trump is one of these people who loves loyalty. So he's going to repay these people to keep them okay with him with his loyalty pledges. But it should have been the Pentagon chiefs. So now Rubio has got to be the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State. He's going to be spread thin. He's already compromised all of his values to be this Secretary of State. You can see it all in him. He just have no pride about himself at all. He's compromised, and we can all see it. So I thank Ari Melber and his two guests for giving us a nice lesson on what's going on with the National Security Advisor firing over Signalgate and Rubio taking over and wearing two hats now. So we're going to leave it right here, guys. I ask you to go ahead and subscribe so we can help this channel grow. Give me a voice to continue on in the future, all the way into the midterms next year and beyond. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be doing this. I want to do what it takes to help this Democratic Party take back the House and the Senate so we can get some investigations going and we can get back to governing for the American people like we were doing under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Okay, we're going to leave it here. I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks again for watching. I ask you guys to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you.